Hi, everybody. So welcome to our very final group critique. Um, and we'll get started here looking at everybody's work in just a minute, but I just wanted to make a few final comments. Um, so you've learned a lot in this class about Photoshop, and keep practicing what you've learned. You know, you may not pick up Photoshop for maybe a few months or longer, but when you do, you know, do practice some of the things that we have worked on because that's the way to keep your skills fresh. And the skills you've learned here, you know, you may not ever do another montage like this. Some people never do in their design career, you know, a montage by, you know, using layer masks and sort of building things into a new scene. Sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. But there's a lot of other things in this class that I think everybody in working in Photoshop will use, like adjustment layers, you know, or correcting certain things in the image, using the crop tool, knowing what pixels are and you know what they mean in relation to your photograph. Those are just like, and you know more that we've covered, but those are some really, I think, important skills. And keep in mind that what Photoshop is really is a photograph editing program. Um, so if you have learned to like or you know appreciate Photoshop more in this class, that's terrific. But don't forget that you know other programs like Illustrator are also really have their place. You know, they tend to do non-photographic things, more text-based, more vector, drawing, illustration, that kind of thing. And so they're really all about, and you can combine them. You can like combine things from Photoshop and Illustrator and vice versa. But keep in mind that each of those programs do different things, and what we've learned here in this class are really specific things related to you know getting the most out of Photoshop. But there is a lot more that you can learn in Photoshop, as you probably guessed. We've covered some really, I think, important things like the idea of non-destructive editing and how to do that. And that will make you look like you're somebody who knows Photoshop. There are still people like kind of who spend a lot of time in Photoshop who are doing, you know, things like destructive editing, you know, not using adjustment layers, that kind of thing. And you know how to not to do that and why, which is really important. But if you want to kind of extend your skills more, you know, there's so much on the first of all just on the internet and in YouTube, but you also as a student have access to lynda.com, you know, which I'm sure you know about. Let's see, let's just go there. So if you go into the help area here, right here, AI help, and you scroll down, the Thinking Storm is live tutoring, and you go down, 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 you will get to lynda.com, and you have a free subscription when you're a student. Let's just go in here. And if you haven't had a chance to look around here, you know, if you ever have a day that you have some spare time, it's really, I think, really great to just kind of look around here. Um, and just see what's, you know, you can just go in here and um, you know, look for, let's see, where's our, hold on a second here. For some reason, I'm not getting to, let me just see if I can get to the home page here. Well, here, yeah, right here. So you can go to design, you know, and you can sort by software. Um, and there's actually so many other things beyond design at this point, which you probably may not need to use, but you can like look at all their Photoshop classes. They've got so many. You can actually use the videos and learn more techniques from, you know, these are really, lynda.com has the advantage of having like really top level professionals, but they're really good teachers. So you can learn more about, you know, Photoshop. Maybe you want to learn more about photo editing, you know, just straight photo editing. I know that there's, you know, typically a lot of people who are into photography in our classes, and there's, you know, you can just click this one right here and just view all of the different, this one right here. Some of these will cover some of the ones we've already, you know, some of the things we've already worked on, but there'll be a lot in here you'll be new to you. So take advantage of those now, even if you aren't in school and you don't have a free subscription through, you know, through this link. Lynda.com is very inexpensive. I don't know what it is right now. It used to be like $25 a month. So if you ever have like a month free, you know, like you're not working or you don't have a lot of um, things on your plate, you know, you could spend a whole month for 25 bucks and take a whole bunch of courses, and there you can get certificates through them that you can collect. Sometimes that can be good to add to your resume, certainly listing the courses you've taken. You can build little projects for your, for your portfolio from what you've learned. So yeah, so I just wanted to point that out in case I know that we're so busy in class with all the things we do that you may not have a chance to get over to lynda.com, but it is I think a really terrific resource for people who are wanting to build a career in design, because you can really push your skills further and further. Um, and two, like if you like this idea of montaging, you can keep having fun. Maybe you can build another character of your choosing. Just have fun and do kind of fun little things. Again, they can be things you add. You could have a series of characters, built in Photoshop using the skills we've learned, and you can add them to your portfolio if you like. That can be interesting sort of ways to kind of, again, sort of advance your skills and demonstrate what you've been learning. Hi, Katie. So for this assignment, I've just pulled everyone's just previous tasks just to see what everyone's been up to. And you just mentioned that you have changed the bow. You've desaturated the bow. And let me just move this out of the way here. And yeah, it's so interesting how I can see on this one why you may have always gone to the bow. This happens to me. I think this is a really common experience where you keep looking at something and you think, why doesn't it quite work? And what you've done is really a great idea, is like to keep coming back to something until you finally figure it out. Sometimes I've left stuff without figuring it out. Like I've known that there was this problem area and I've left it. And then sure enough, somebody comes around who's looking at like a painting or something that I've worked on, and they say, like a fellow artist, who will come and say, there's this little part there that really bothers me. And I'm like, oh, yeah, yeah, that bothered me too. But I didn't change it because somehow, and probably the reason is that I didn't quite figure out how to fix it. So by doing what you're doing, that's exactly, the correct design process is to run with your intuition and see if you can't experiment until you find it. And sometimes we don't figure it out, and that's okay too. But I think you did, and that looks great. So just by desaturating this bow just a little bit. Okay, all right, I think that's it. I don't see anything else you need to change. I think you've done a wonderful job here on your character, bringing it to life. And yeah, I hope you've learned a lot in this class. And you're right. I encourage everybody to go back to their sketches, if you can, and take a look at them and see how just a sketch that comes out of your head at one point can evolve. How did it change? How did it stay the same? How can you use your kind of your brainstorming process to help guide your creative process. Yeah, I like the changes you've made. I think that the warp of the body is a great idea, to just give it a little more, movement. And you said to make it a little more feminine, which, why not? You could probably experiment with the warp a little bit. Warping, the puppet warp takes a little bit of practice. And I think you've got a good, you're going in a good direction here. It's a little bit like lumpy here. If you could get a little curve here, that might be nice. If you can, you might want to experiment with that just a wee bit more. But I really love the idea, and I love the idea of the spatula too. You might play a little bit more with the layer mask. Let's just look at this. So this particular spatula, this could be problematic to make a layer mask. Like even like somebody who really mastered the layer mask, which I think everyone in the class, you're getting to that point now where you're probably really good at making layer masks now. But even if you have a really good skill in that area, if you have a photograph that has a lot of similarity to the background, where parts of the object has a very strong similarity in terms of color, and doesn't have a lot of edge, like the contrast, it's going to be really hard to make a good layer mask. So if I were you, I would get a different spatula that has a better quality and then use that. I would also maybe suggest, I think for our character, it might be good to just let your character be the main thing. Because if you start, I have noticed after working with a lot of students on this assignment, that if you add other objects to the background, then it can get in the way of your character, because it starts making everything look like objects, even your character, and you want to make sure to try to let your character really hang together. Okay, so I would do that. With your arms, I might sort of, when I think of an arm, I tend to think of an arm as going upwards, like being a little bit more up here, you know? So I might move that up. You know what I might also do is maybe instead of, I think you'd have more flexibility if you just had, like if you duplicated this guy. Um, so I would duplicate that. But first of all, what I might do is I might mask. This is an easy way because, you know, if you want to keep it this side, I might mask off the end here, like just kind of real roughly, you know, just kind of like I'm masking it, I'm not erasing it, just so that I don't see it sticking out. And then if I have two of them, you know, duplicate this layer, then I can place that wherever I want to. I don't have to, you know, kind of juggle it between the two. So you have a lot more creativity if you do that. So you might give that a try. Um, and you know, in terms of bodies, bodies can be like you can really be very creative with the body in your character, like an animal type of body or a bird or a human. But I think when you pick the form, in your case it's a human, that's why I'm moving the arms up, because we typically see the arms higher. And then when you want to give that kind of impression or illusion that all of these objects are making a body, it can help if you make it look like where we might expect that particular thing to be in that particular body, if that makes sense. And we do tend to see arms coming up a little higher. So you might give that a try. Okay, I like the idea of making the brown text. I would keep experimenting with your text style here. You know, try to see if you can find something that has a little more boldness to it, because I feel like this particular text style, it's a lot, I agree, it has a lot more character, but it's a little, you know, it has a lot of kind of little bits in it, which when you zoom out makes it hard to see. So you might think of something solid or bigger footprint and keep experimenting. Maybe it could be a little lighter too. The color, like maybe like a lighter beige in here so that it stands out, you know, gets a little more contrast, you know. So yeah, keep experimenting. And you know, maybe like you might want to play with the, well, that's good. I think that's probably some, gives you some chance to, some things to work on. I think you probably could still experiment with the kind of the placement of the background just a little bit. Um, you know, it feels like I don't know if I need to, I've mentioned this before, I'm not sure if I need to see all of the griddle sizes. Um, you know, maybe it could be a little bigger, you know, less detail. You could maybe use a adjustment layer to kind of give it a little bit more of the brown quality, brown color. But, you know, I would leave that and work on the other parts at this point and just see if you could, if I were to make an order for the things I would recommend changing, I would work on the spatula, the text, and the arms. And I think that would really be good. Okay, yes, what can we do here? This is before and this is after. I like that. I think that looks nice, sort of scattered across. And I don't know if I have really anything else to add. I think you, I don't know if there's anything else that has changed here. I think that's maybe it. I think it looks really good. You know, if there was anything I might suggest, I'm wondering about, so this little dark area, I wonder if you need that dark area. I really love the shifts of light to gray in here, but I'm wondering if going a little dark here doesn't bring attention to this area, because I keep looking, I have been looking at it and sort of just bringing my eye there. And I do think we definitely want to be, you know, looking at your character in the text. So if you can, I might just like maybe soften that a little bit. You know, you could have it a little darker, but maybe not so dark, you know. It looks like, so this looks like the background, uh, you could sort of duplicate that layer so you don't, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? So you don't, you know, do any destructive editing, but you know what you could use is you could sort of use the, what's a tool that you could use here? There's a number of tools. An easy old-fashioned way is to, let me see if I can find it in here. I was thinking of is the dodge tool right in here. It kind of like, it changes the exposure of a certain area, and it basically works like a paintbrush where it, you can use the adjustments in there and play with it, but it sort of like lightens an area. Let's see if I've got the right, sorry, I don't. you know, kind of, it can like, you have to be careful because you can get sort of little marks on it, which I am getting, but you can sort of lighten a little an area that way. There's another tool called the sponge tool. Let's see, where's that one? I don't use that one very often, but there it is, the sponge tool. It kind of sponges up things, colors, so you can give that a try. In some ways that might work a little bit better, but it's very light. But anyhow, so that's, I might work with that just a little bit more and see, you know, see if you could, um, you could, you could work with that area. Um, yeah, and so just, you know, in terms of your entire character design, I think you did a really nice job here at um, working with the idea of all of these elements. It's very interesting how all of your elements, like paper and the garbage bags, they're all kind of like these very malleable substances, aren't they? Like crumpling paper or the garbage bags, and how that they really work together nicely. And then you have these contrasting elements that are like a little bit harder, but that you've also bent them to become also quite soft and sort of really work themselves into, you know, the kind of malleable nature of the other materials. So I think it worked out really well. Yeah, nice job. Jennifer, yeah, I should probably send a note to the tutoring center about the white box. I'm imagining they didn't know how to fix it because, you know, in Photoshop, a lot of times people can know Photoshop really, really well and do a lot in Photoshop, but they may not have ever done a lot of masking the way we're using masking. It is sort of a it's a really good skill to know. I think, I mean, I really am partial to it, but it is like a lot of people who are working in Photoshop may not do this type of montage style, and that's probably why they were unused to seeing that white box. And because I work within this class a lot, I see it all the time, and I had to really figure out myself what was going on when I first saw it. So anyhow, not making excuses for them, but that's maybe why they couldn't figure it out. Okay, yeah, so I love the change you made with the eyes. That's very cute and it matches the pink. I think your color scheme is just really wonderful, worked out really well. And your text looks really good. I like the way you've placed it here. Yeah, I mean, overall, I think this looks really, really good. You know, I've been encouraging folks to put movement into their character, you know, instead of having it like just very symmetrically sort of placed. But yours has a lot of, you know, yours is very symmetrical. It actually has movement in the sense that the arms are raised and it's kind of like jumping to the side. And I think that whole symmetrical look works really well with your character overall. You know, with the lines of your cupcake that pick up on the lines, the vertical lines of the background. There's something that really works well all together with that. I don't know how you planned it or if it was sort of an intuitive design decision, but I think it really came together nicely, all of the different shapes and lines in the background and the foreground. And I think your shadow looks really good here. That's a really nice look to have. Yeah, I think that's, yeah, I don't think I have any suggestions here. I think it turned out really well. So nice job. Conrad, yeah, I think this background works really well. You have the hint of the clouds, and you know, I like the, you know, sort of the darkness that comes up at the top, and the light in the background. I think it really sets your character off. I think that somebody mentioned, Katie mentioned maybe there is a little bit of pixelation here that I noticed as well, and she had a suggestion of maybe blurring it a little bit, which is possible. Or, you know, sometimes blurring can take, maybe we'll do a little blurring together, selective blurring. Uh, but if you look for cloud imagery in Google Images, you know, on the high res setting that we've done in the tools area, the tool setting in Google Images, I bet you could probably find something like a kind of like cloud formation that you could pull in. You know, it probably wouldn't be too hard. So you can sort of think about that. But let's actually blur. One of the things I'm thinking about with blurring too is maybe your text is just almost like a tiny bit hard to read, and I think it's because maybe it's hard to say. Like if we turn off the, I always do this. I turn off this, and then I look. Okay, is it easier to read there? Yes, it is. So that can. So what that means is that maybe the background is the color is a little too close. That's a possibility. It also could be maybe there's a little too much detail behind it, although there isn't a lot of details. So I'm thinking it may be the color. But what we can do is we can sort of selectively, I don't think we've done a lot of this, so if you don't mind, I'll use yours as an example here. And so you can create a smart object out of your layer, but for this particular, for blurring something, I really like to keep the layer intact, because when you do smart objects, then it goes into its own window, and I find it's really useful to see it inside the whole design. So you can actually do either a field blur or an iris blur. They're almost the same thing. But what you can do is take your design, and so we're going to start by so it's got a little pinpoint in here, and wherever it is, we're going to add more pinpoints here, but I'm going to turn this down to 0 blur because I don't want to blur there, so I'll just leave that guy there for now. But maybe I want to blur down here, so what I can do is I can put in some little pins here, and I can start then playing with this, and it'll blur sort of around that area and sort of blending outwards right where that point is. So then you can kind of like play around. I'm going to just make it quite extreme, but of course you can do whatever you want with it, or not. If you don't want to do this at all, there's probably other ways to work on it. I'm just kind of experimenting with it, and let's just click OK. It's probably going to take a while to process. Yeah, so it helped a little bit with the pixelation here. I could have gone a little higher because I think this is the main area here. And I think it did. Let's just look here now. Help with the legibility of the text a little bit. So legibility of the text, what can we do with that? So I don't have this typeface. I do really like the colors of it, so I would be inclined to, either just go a little darker behind it, if you can, or go a little lighter, and I think that's all you would need to do. Yeah, so other than that, I think everything looks good. So just your background, really, just look a little bit further into that. Diana, so I just pulled yours. Looks like you may just have inadvertently put your file into the previous thread, so I just pulled it in here. So this is task 2, and this is 3. And oh yeah, much nicer. I love this background a lot better. It's really highlighting your character. I also love this element here. It looks like it's a pear that it's really beautiful with all of your elements. So let's see here. So I would say that I think the thing that stands out for me is that the text is maybe still a little bit hard to read. I'm pulling it up to see if it's a little bit, maybe a little higher here. And so the stroke is definitely, I think, good, and so is the drop shadow. Actually, so it's interesting, those two both helped to make it a little more legible. Which was good. So good moves there. Maybe you have a little room here. And why isn't it going bigger? Hold on a second here. So I made your text a little bigger to fill the space. Why not? And then I kind of just also was playing around with this. Sometimes, I'm sure you did this. I was playing around with this to see, is there an area in this particular photograph? And I think you really like the red in there, although that's something you could probably change. I was just kind of looking for an area in here that maybe would make it easier to read. Now, this is, of course, the easiest to read, this little area, without it. So I wonder, maybe you don't need that? I don't know. So play with that, or maybe something a little simpler. you know, a photograph that's very simple so that your text is a little easier to read. Otherwise, I really like the text treatment. You know, I like that kind of rounded, big font. I think it looks really good. And I like the shadow. That looks really good. Your character. I might make your character just a wee bit bigger just to kind of go up a little higher. Um, Otherwise, I think it's looking really good, and you've made a lot of good changes in your character over the weeks, which is great, and you know, really highlighted a lot of beautiful elements in her. So yeah, I think that's really the only thing that I'd recommend is just play a little bit more with the type, maybe make your character just a wee bit bigger. And I have some comments in the previous task that I don't know if you've had a chance to see yet. Some of the comments that I made was that I'd love it if you figured out a way to make this, it looks like the files are the same. That's why I'm assuming you didn't um, have a chance to see my previous feedback. So some of the comments I made was that I'd love to see you maybe figure out a way to maybe blur out the background here. Do we really need to see the background, or would it be just enough to see the concrete that Garden Glitter Grace is standing on? Do you know what I mean? Like it's I don't know if that adds to it because it's taking away from her. So I would maybe or find another, you know, simpler photograph or enlarge this photograph so we don't see all this. Like there's a number of ways, you know, you've seen me blur things in this particular group critique which you could work with. But there's other techniques as well. I mentioned too in a couple of tasks, so I'm wondering if you're seeing my feedback, that this hose looks like it was accidentally squished because the little circle let's see, do I have this open? Let me just look here in Photoshop. So it looks like maybe it's a little squished. I think it might look a little bit better, but I would like move it up a little, like I would open it up this way a little bit, grab it, transform it a little bit so that this doesn't look so flattened. Um, the other thing I may have mentioned is to keep working with the color harmony. So you've got greens and pinks, and you know, this orange here doesn't seem like it's quite fitting into the character design. You know, maybe it could be pink or green. You know, it just, I think that would be an easy fix, you know, to color harmonize it. Another thing I would work on too, is this body area in here. Somehow feeling like it still doesn't, it's not quite reading as a character quite yet. Like the face is starting to read in the head, but in the body, the arms are, you know, working, but the body feels like it's maybe a little bit, it's becoming too much of a shrub, not enough of a character. Like it looks like, do you know what I mean? Like I might really experiment maybe with a whole different element in here for the torso, like something that's a little more solid so that it, like, again, it sort of reads like, I can just imagine like a watermelon or a gourd or something that would really stabilize it. So then all of these other kind of frillier sort of leafy elements could contrast off of it, and it would really start hanging together as a character a little bit more. I think that'd be awesome. And so other thing too is, you know, I would maybe take the shadow and reduce the strength of it. Shadows typically are not, well, sometimes they can be pretty dark, but in your case it feels like maybe it's a little bit too strong. So I might soften it a little bit, again, depending what you end up with the background and what you end up with your character. But that's what I'd work on. So I'm glad you were able to submit this by the deadline so we could get into the group critique. I know you've had a little bit of a challenge doing that through this session, but you know, we still have a little bit of time left, so I'm sure you can make some good changes here. Okay, Amy, let's see. So here's your character before, and oh, yeah, I like what you did. So it looks like you kind of warmed up the background a little, which was really, yeah, I like that. You know, sometimes warm backgrounds can be a little bit overwhelming, you know, or like kind of somehow, oh, what's the word? Advance a little too much, but I think in your case it works really well, and I think because you've got a lot of very strong colors in your character. So yeah, overall I think this looks really good. I love the arms. I think that's very cute, and what you've done with Puppet Warp, really nice job. And I like this new text too. I think that it's very appropriate to the style of your character. Has that kind of old, sort of oldie time, traditional, let's see, I think this is your text right here, look, which I think is really good. The color is really good. This is it. Is this it? Yes. Just sort of playing with these, kind of thinking about maybe like it feels like it's maybe getting a little bit sort of crunched in places where it's a little hard to read, and I'm wondering, I might just sort of play with some of your effects here. I think I like the darkness and lightness of what you're doing, so I'm not sure. So I like that too. You know what I mean? It sort of feels like it's like sort of areas here that are getting a little illegible. So if I'd play with that. I'm just kind of turning things on and off. Just sometimes simpler is good. Um, so I might just, experiment just a little bit more with these areas and see if you can kind of clean it up a little bit, but keep that sort of variation in color. You know what I mean? Um, I'm not 100% sure how to do that with the different effects, but I think you'll probably be able to sort of to play with that and see. But whatever you do, I like the color. The red is really good. The dark red is really nice, and the font style is very nice too. Okay, so that's all I think you need to work on. I think everything else looks really great. All right, so here's before and after. Yeah, that table is really a nice choice. There's something about it that has kind of a diner look to it. Um, and I would just say, the only thing I would say about the background is I would consider, so I would take and just expand it. Let's see if we can do that. I'm going to hold down the shift key here to take out the hamburger. The reason why is you're using a hamburger for your character, and so by adding in an extra hamburger behind it, you kind of confuse it. It makes it hard to actually see the work you have been doing. You know what I mean? Like, let your character just be on a nice simple background and let it be just the way it is, Now, unfortunately, I think what I've done here by doing that is I have like pixelated the background because I've made it too big. So let's go to Google Images, typed in wood grain table, and I've used the tools to search for a large image right here, which we've been doing. And there's so many. Actually, this is like you could probably find something that just is perfect for what you want. It looks like you want something that's a bit in perspective, not something flat on. So I would just go through and see, if you can find something. Like, there's a lot of not good ones, like these watermarked ones and such, but you could probably find something like some of the ones at the beginning. These are actually quite nice. They probably aren't quite the perspective you're looking for because they're straight on, but you could find something. So that's what I would do there. Now that you know that that's what you want, is just to be really picky about the choice that you make. It's great. Your character looks good. With your character, there's maybe, I'm noticing now, this happens when you put a background on, there's maybe a little bit of an issue here with your mask right here, and that's easy to fix because you've got a layer mask. So now you can just click on that layer mask and do the technique that we've been doing throughout the class, and you can just manually mask this out, like just kind of get rid of this, it's super easy. I don't know if it's a little bit there, but there you go. I don't know if I see anything more here, but at this point too, it's always good to just, for everybody, oh look, there's a little watermark there. Did you see that? Yeah, so I would, where did that come from? So it looks like maybe you have two different arms, like from two different photographs. So that's good because maybe it is the same photograph. That's interesting. So it looks like these lines are happening. So you can actually heal these lines. This is a little harder to get rid of, but I would just dump this guy here and, you know, just take and use this arm here. You can just duplicate it. And then you can move it over. Oops, I don't know if I did that quite right. What happened here? Uh, I'm not sure what's happening. Let me just research this. Yeah, you have some spot healing above, which is what I didn't see that. So let's see. That's why it was doing that. Yeah, so well, you might want to just then duplicate the original photograph and put it in there. And it looks like what you were doing is spot healing some of the watermarking, and that you hadn't done it here yet. So yeah, so you can, I would just do it on this side. You know, do what you did. You know, it's just I missed that. Or just get a pickle without that. Although I do like this pickle image. I think it works really well with your character, so maybe you can just fix that. Okay, finally, I would keep working on your text as well. It still seems like the color is a bit dark and it's hard to see. So maybe just like pick one of the lighter colors in here, you know, like the yellow or the green, light green. I think that would really benefit your character. And use that to tie it together, you know. You could also probably do a little more color matching with some adjustment layers in your character. Like something I'm thinking about is like, so you've got, what I like to do when I have to work on a color palette is to name all the colors that I actually do have. What's going on here with the mouth? Okay, so let's see. If you can, for this part here, so it looks like you're picking for the mouth here. It's okay, but you know, it's not the whole thing. It looks like it's kind of cut off here. So if you can find something red that is not so cut off, like that's not hidden by something else, that would be awesome. You know, that would be a great way to improve this little area here. But what I was going to say is, like, I like to name all the colors in a design that I have. So I would say I have brown, you know, earthy colors. I have sort of a dark red, a bright red, green, yellowy green, and then some sort of orangey red, you know, so like reds, greens, so maybe reds, greens, and yellows. So like, what could I do maybe to, like, what I would probably go in here is like maybe do something with an adjustment layer here to turn this color to match something else. Like, maybe our eyes could be green instead of, you know, the color they are, and then they'd match this green, you know. So you can kind of do a little more matching, like take your text and again match it with something in your character design. Okay, so those are some things I'd work on. All right, so this is the previous one, and this is your change. And oh yeah, much better. That background too, I think, adds a lot of depth to your design because of the darker area in here. You know, dark recedes. I don't know if you've taken our color theory class yet or another color theory, but dark colors go backwards. So do cooler colors and these saturated colors. And so having a background that does that and is also sort of more simple will mean that it will create more space in your character, in your design, and it will also allow for your character to be more, you know, center stage. That's especially true for your character. Something else I might even do, so when you're working with this background, like, do we need to have these stairs here? And I feel like they're also, you know, when you're working in design, one of the things you'll often, you know, maybe have noticed everyone that I do is if you're going to do something, it's good to just do it in a bold way in design, like exaggerate things or, you know, really simplify or, you know, if you're making a character all kind of like, um, have certain kinds of motion like you're doing, really exaggerate it just like you've done here. You know, those kinds of things really bring a design to life. You know, it's just, and subtlety is good too. I love subtlety, but a lot of times in design we have to be really brave and be courageous and just really push things to the limit. So that's maybe what I would do here, is just to eliminate that, so you just have this stage. That's it. Um, I would probably even just get rid of these lights up here too. I don't know if they were in your. I may have done something with them when I changed it. Let's see. Yeah, see, I moved them around. So this is where I would expand it again. Let's just do that, pull it up, and then move it down. This is why when you have, also when you have images that are higher resolution, you can play with them more, which is always good. Okay, all right, so that's probably what I would do there. I think that looks really good. Let's see, your character colors. You've got blue, green, pink, and now you've got this brown in here in the background. I sort of feel like you maybe still have a little too much color going on, differences in color, and I would be inclined to keep experimenting with that. Again, sort of thinking about what color will you keep. Uh, um, you know, whatever you choose, like you've got yellow and green here and pink, maybe that would be all your colors, and you would take the background and you'd turn that to one of those colors, like you'd make it more purple or pink, um, you know, just to kind of play with that color. You know, you've got the pale pink here. Maybe the pale pink needs to be repeated, you know, in the text as well. You've got a lot of different colors in the text, so kind of keep maybe experimenting with that a little bit more. I think that would be really great. And you know, kind of I notice you have a tendency to add a lot to your design, so that's something to be mindful, that you have that desire to do that, which sometimes that can work in a design, but sometimes you really do have to like focus on what is the message I'm trying to send. How can I take the strongest parts of my design and bring them together um, in the clearest way. And sometimes that's taking things out, reducing distractions. So I'd keep working with that. Mm, yeah, I think that's that's what I would suggest at this point. Okay, okay, Jessica. All right, so you made some changes. Some you were happy with, and maybe some you weren't so happy to make. Let's take a look at. I'm going to just open these up in Photoshop. Oops. So let's see. So the caterpillar. Yeah, so you know, so you like the caterpillar, and I suggested you take it out just because it was so busy, and but you know, maybe there's something you could use to create that smile that is not so busy. And what's happening with this caterpillar? It's like when I zoom out, it's all I see is a lot of very sort of small little detail, and I don't really capture it. I'm losing the sense of it being a form. You know what I mean? So if there's something you could add that would give you that smile that is more like tubular without a lot of detail on it, I think that could work. Like what could you use? Like I'm thinking about things from the garden, like a, you know, fruit or vegetable that might grow that can kind of give you those curvy, you know, kind of curvy sort of round shape. So you might play with that. I love the new colors. So in design too, it's really interesting to play with the colors that that are on in an unexpected way. Like so these pots, which are usually terracotta colors, you know, if you change them, suddenly you get something very fresh and new. You know, like they're, well, we look at them and we go, oh, that's a terracotta pot, but it's blue, isn't that amazing? Or pardon me, purple, isn't that amazing? So you never, and this is true for everybody, never hesitate to, especially, you know, when you have creative license with the project, to change colors. They don't have to be real or according to nature. You know, I love what you've done with the blue here and the pale blue. That's great. And also the positioning is really wonderful too. Yeah, I think that looks really great. I might even play with the color here, the green here. So the green, this is the only thing that's green in your design. So what can we do that either, like, I feel like I do like the blue color here for the text, but it feels like this is the only thing that's not matched somewhere else. And it would be nice to tie it in. So what if we made this green, the text green, or what if we turned this into a purple or blue color, you know, like one of those things. Um, your text is still is a little hard to read. I love the elegant script. It's one of my very favorite types of scripts. I'm also wondering if your particular character, if you, because you have this nice bulky big character, which I love, you know, it's a bit like Katie's in the sense that it's very sort of big and bold. Maybe your text needs to be a little bit more like that. Sometimes contrast is good, like a big thing with a small, like a completely different thing is good. But in your case, I feel like we're not seeing the text, you know? So you might experiment maybe with a different text, maybe something that has rounded forms, maybe something that's got a little more tradition to it so you can have that sort of more traditional, old-fashioned look. But I would experiment with that a little bit more. Depending upon what type of text that you get in terms of like maybe if you get a bold text, it's going to work. You don't have to do anything else. But if you still find it's a little hard to read, you could also do that selective blurring thing that I did on a previous assignment where you could blur the bottom out and keep all of this wonderful patterning of the stones in the top. Do you know what I mean? That's often a good way of fixing something, is sort of blurring the bottom or kind of like lightening it in some way so that you have a simple background behind it. But that's something you can balance out if you decide to change the text. If you want to keep this text, well, actually, let's go ahead and blur it. Let me do that and see. Just took it quickly, just blurred a little like I did before. I didn't do a very good job of blending it. You know, you can see kind of it sort of goes from blurred to not blurred pretty quickly, but you can fix that with adding more pins in there. And it is definitely easier to see here, although I still feel like it doesn't quite, I still feel like you could experiment with a bolder font for your character. It still doesn't seem like it's quite strong enough to fit. Anyhow, so I think you're going in a good direction here and you really are almost done. Okay, this is your previous version, and oh yeah, yeah. So, you know, it's interesting how sometimes you have to like sacrifice something in a design to get to the um, what you want to highlight in a design. Like for example, I love the bright colors in this background. You know, I really just think overall it's really beautiful. But then when I see it with the kind of more subdued background, I really see the character a lot more clearly, and I also really see the colors of the character. You know, it's not being overshadowed. So I think it worked really well. It also, I think I'm also picking up on the shadow a lot more, seeing that, and I really do love the change to the text here of this style and the line, and also the connection to the orange here. So yeah, overall I think this looks really good. I think you did a nice job, and you know, have this very sort of serene and centered character standing in the middle of the desert. Um, and yeah, you know, looks good. You've got a lot of different elements in your file, and yeah, I don't think I see any changes here. I think you've done a nice job polishing it. Good job. Lee, this is your previous version, and this is your new version. And yes, I love the background. I think that works much better for your character. It's really nice, very simple, but yet it has quite a lot of nuance to it. You know, there's a lot going on. Um, yeah, so, and Terrible Toys Todd. Yeah, so that, yeah, somebody mentioned there's an S in there. I like this typeface too. It really works with the colors. The main thing here I would just say is, you know, it still feels like your character is just a little small in here. I would love to see your character a bit bigger in here. Like, do we need to see, you know, the tank? You know, like, could the tank maybe, even though it's a beautiful element, like maybe it could, maybe we don't need it, you know? Man, maybe your character instead could be the thing that fills this space. Do you know what I mean? And I mentioned a few things before about the layer masks and about the design of the character, just, you know, how your character is a little bit, you know, it'd be nice if it was a little more creative in terms of designing it. You know, it has a very, it's built out of a lot of human elements, and I'd really love to see more object-based designs. But I'm sure you've listened to that feedback and, you know, So I don't want to repeat too much, but oh yeah, this is a beautiful image. You know, this background, it's really just, you know, it's very subtle and yet has this beautiful color and detail, and it works really beautifully as a background. So again, you know, if you want to work further on this, what I would suggest is just bring your character, let your character fill the entire space. You know, work on the layer masks that we did back in Milestone 3. You know, if you can, work a little bit more on those, and then maybe play with your design.